Good morning.
Red Buzzards.
Red Buzzards. I've been wanting to say that for 2 weeks.
Yeah, right?
Oh, my bad. I stole your thunder.
No, that's all right. It's okay.
You can say it again.
All right. Good morning. Oh, you mean the Fred Buzzards? No,
Yeah.
good morning. Did you guys notice I have Thankful back?
Oh. No.
I was cajoled.
Really?
Yeah, oh, yeah. That's another story for another day. Maybe do an episode on guilt.
Yeah. One episode?
No, series.
Right.
Yeah. All of November. As we're approaching Thanksgiving.
I imagine that was a gift from someone and it needs to be in the picture.
What, you mean the pillow? The Thankful pillow?
Yeah.
No, it's my wife trying to decorate the office. No. She was like, I thought you heard the story. This is like this is our office space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And used to be my music studio. And, kind of we share the space with books. And, on this side where you can't see off camera, I got like walls of books and everything and her stuff. And so I said, when we started this podcast, I said, can I turn this into a place like Aaron's got? That didn't go over. So we compromised to make it look kind of professional looking. I got stuck with the pillow. So it incited a pillow war. And the pillow war was like, I would literally flip the pillow over to the backside during the taping and flip it back when we were done until that kind of caused a problem. So now
I'm going to get you a Gene Simmons pillow. Just
what,
like,
does it have the tongue?
Yeah, the tongue. Just set it right next to Thankful.
Oh, shit. It'd be nice if I get a turkey pillow. I can put the tongue next to the feathers. Did you miss me last week?
Yeah, right?
No, it's definitely different not having you.
Man, there's no way. It was so bad. I'll tell you. It was horrible. I never got hit with any sickness like I did. I mean, like last year maybe, but it's pretty awful. And I know teachers I've worked with that their immune systems are like iron walls, but that's after like 20 some years and around children. I'm not there. I'm still getting whacked with everything, but whatever. It is what it is. So I'll be clearing my throat a lot, but that's what coffee's for, I guess. So the list I sent you guys, I know I have a lot to say on this today that could take literally an hour just in mind, but so why don't we just kind of dive in?
Yeah, let's just see where it goes. And if we start to...
Are we serious? Really? Wait,
okay.
Say something so we can see that on the screen. No, it's Sesame Street Fever.
Hold on, I got to pull it up.
Grover.
Wow. I have no idea what that is. I know what Sesame Street is, but I don't know what that album is.
Dude, how do you not? No, I'm kidding. It's a joke.
Did you know, in the vein of that Leonard Nimoy did a double album as Mr. Spock from Star Trek?
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was called The Two Sides of Leonard Nimoy. It was a double disc. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. On the first disc, it was him just singing his normal stuff, right?
Yeah,
or just kind of standards and stuff. And on the second disc, it was him as Mr. Spock from Star Trek singing. And he did a video, or he actually made a music video that was like largely panned for its kind of cheesiness, but it was like the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. You guys never seen this thing?
That has to be on YouTube.
Oh, it is on YouTube. In fact, I want everybody in the audience today, all of our subscribers, to go watch the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins by Leonard Nimoy. You will sit there, it will blow your mind. You come out of it going, my life will never be the same. There are certain images you cannot erase from your brain. That's one of them. Trust me.
Okay. Done.
Check it out. He was into like folk song, which is crazy to think about.
All right, well, who's gonna throw out an album to start this?
You go.
Yeah,
Me?
go, Joe. Go.
Okay. So this is something I didn't discover until later on, but Eric Johnson's Venus Isle is,
love it.
I think just it changed the way I like what I strive to be able to do on the guitar in a lot of ways.
Is that the one with there's a second track on there I loved? Battle We Have Won. Is that the album?
All about the second track, or
I think it's the second track. The first track, Venus Isle, was the first track, right? The title track. And then I think
so Venus Isle and Battle We Have Won.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Okay, go. I'm sorry. Just make sure I have the right record.
No, I think that there's some like cheesy 80 sounding music. Like his singing is kind of whatever to me, but he just like, I think it's in the end of All About You. He just rips in his Eric Johnson way. And so I'm mesmerized by his playing, and I realized I found him more through Joe Bonamassa. I realized the things I like most about Joe Bonamassa are the things he took from Eric Johnson, which is fine. Like, I'm glad people are playing like that because I like to listen to it. But Eric Johnson uses a lot of patterns of 6s and 5s,
right?
A lot of ascending and descending pentatonic patterns. And Troy Grady over at Cracking the Code has done an incredible job of taking video of Eric Johnson and like going slow motion and like looking at the actual series of alternate picking and sweeping to change strings. And I've taken that and I try to incorporate it into my playing. I mean, it's somewhat natural now. It's how I move about the strings when I'm playing more rock kind of stuff.
EJ, I remember Aaron probably remembers the story. We got into, well, it was me. I got into it, but I mean, we were both fans of Eric Johnson for a while. And there was a time when we were at the Black Note Studios, and I remember we were watching Eric Johnson on video play during his performance in Austin City Limits. Remember this, Aaron?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And we were watching, and at this point, Aaron and I were into the analytical phase of things. Like we were like breaking things open. Like we, look at rewinding like 10 seconds over and over and over again to kind of check things out. And I remember just looking at that going, he was so dead on, except for he was so nervous. Remember this? We talked about this. Because he was playing in his hometown.
Yeah, he was nervous and
he was stiff. And
there's a spot where you can actually see he makes a mistake.
He makes a mistake.
And he like shakes his head.
Yeah, it's incredible. But then, we got into, I remember there was a time we were teaching a lot of Eric Johnson licks in the studio, and we talked about just the very thing, like how he structures everything. I love the fact that he was primarily a pentatonic player, or at least in the umbrella of pentatonic forms, but was so tasty about the way he would phrase and like you said, how he would stack things. And for me, his chordal arpeggiation, like taking, just like
spread arpeggios.
Spread arpeggios, right?
He hits root, then the 5th on the next string, and then he jumps up to the 3rd.
And sometimes the 7th.
As a 10th.
Yeah, right. And he would put these kind of, these non-harmonic tones in there too, to kind of sweeten. And then, but going back to your Venus Isle album, by the time he gets to Venus Isle, I think it's becoming more, I don't want to say more pop. I mean, that Battle We Have Won track, I always loved the texture of it and his vocal kind of styles. But have you ever heard Tones, his first record, the one before Avia Musicom? That album was like first of all, it's country based. So it's not really the rock shred that Avia Musicom brings out. It's got more of a country flavor. But if you really want to get into like EJ's power, and when he was like really developing his technique, those first 2 records are just off the charts.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
But he's also got an album he did with Mike Stern.
Yeah, the jazz guy, Telly guy.
Mike Stern's. I actually got to meet Mike Stern. He's awesome player. He's played with a lot of really famous players, but they do a great, like, they've got some cool back and forth, and it's cool to have 2 virtuosic, totally different sounding guitarists playing alongside each other. And they just, Eric Johnson just shreds on that in his Eric Johnson way.
Yeah, although the one thing about EJ, I never want to paint guitar players in a negative light, but at the same time, who's laughing? Is Aaron? And Aaron and I have talked about this. Like, we spent months in our studios teaching Eric Johnson stuff. After a while, it becomes very homogenized, very flat in the ear. I don't know what it is. I've always said this about his work. I love this guy's playing. I've incorporated elements of my own playing style, but dynamically speaking, I always wish Eric would have more of like, he'd breathe more in his dynamicism. He's so good at like putting emphasis on tone. Like, you ever notice like when he puts little he hits certain notes and he puts pinch harmonics in certain notes and they just sing and they, you know what I mean?
Top of an ascending run, he'll do it.
Brilliant stuff. But I always wanted to see him kind of play more with volume, you know, be more breathing dynamically. And I think he's more kind of flat in that respect.
He's a clean player. I mean, the way he approaches his lines, and that was the one thing for me at the beginning of listening to Eric was he's just so freaking clean. Like it's crazy how crisp his playing is. That's the one thing that I really enjoyed. But I do definitely understand what you're saying, Tony, in terms of it. You just kind of want him to kind of take it just to the next level or whatever that is. I remember seeing 1993, I think it was, somewhere around there. Went up to Boston and saw the G3 tour with Joe, Steve, Eric, and they had Adrian Legg open for him. And I actually got backstage passes and met Joe and Steve. But the funny thing was I actually had backstage passes to meet Eric, but he never showed. But yeah, that was a really, really good show to be able to kind of watch them, all three of them kind of work together. I know you were talking earlier, Joe, about how Mike Stern, and they kind of get that togetherness thing. I mean, does the G3 tour still go on?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's still going on.
It's still going on. That's good.
We saw with who? Who was on the bill?
Yngwie.
Didn't they have Tommy Emmanuel up there with him? Or am I thinking of a different?
Ooh, I don't know.
I saw some video with Satriani and Tommy Emmanuel and another one of the.
I don't know. Petrucci played with them, I think.
Yeah, Petrucci was there.
Yngwie was on it when we were there.
Yeah, but Eric's just a clean player. Venus Out for me, that was probably my introduction into Eric as well. I think coming out of Cliffs of Dover, everybody knows that as soon as they hear it, they're like, wow, that's just amazing. Okay, check this guy out. But Venus Isle was a different direction for Eric. He kind of, I don't know, it wasn't the same Eric.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what he was going for on that record.
Right.
That for me, I listened back. I mean, I like it. I like parts of it, but I'm not sure like what sort of a direction of that thing. You know, like you said, Avia Musicom. I mean, it was very clear what he was trying to convey. Like, here I am, this is how I can play. Here's how I can write. I can do a little bit of singing, but I'm going to burn your face off now.
Right.
I mean, I just didn't get the same kind of power out of V-South. That was more of like, I'm going to play with artistry a little bit. And that's great. I mean, it's all that stuff is great. But I think the overall effect on that record was, it's hard to equate any of his albums together. But I remember once I was in a record store and I saw this one guitar player, the local guy I knew. This is right when Pink Floyd's The Division Bell came out. Remember that album?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it had just been released, and I was going to pick up a copy, and I saw this guitar player friend of mine that was in a band, and I said, hey, Sean, I said, did you listen to this record yet? And he's like, yeah, I just bought it. I go, what'd you think of it? He goes, it's Floyd. You know, it was like that kind of mentality, like I've heard it before kind of thing. And I was always kind of scared of albums that do that. Like I always wanted to hear on a different record, new directions, new things. And for me, Venus Isle's got some gems on it, but there are some fillers, I think, on there too. But
I really liked there were some songs that were almost theatrical in their build up and the momentum behind them. But he had, I mean, going from All About You has just like this theatrical build up, and then he just rips like 4.5 minutes in. He has like one of the best solos in the whole album, I think, in terms of the energy he builds, and he's flashy, but then he gets into like Stevie SRV.
Yeah.
He's got some different tones going on in his guitar, and he actually plays a little bit more like Stevie kind of licks, because that was a huge influence on him early, being from Texas.
Right.
Yes.
But then Manhattan's got some really cool jazzy chords.
A lot of octave moves, like a Wes Montgomery kind of things on there. Yeah.
And then you go to like Camel's Night Out is one of my favorites. Like that one, he's got this he's playing with a lot of Mixolydian variations of his pentatonics, and it really gives it a different flavor. And that song inspired me a lot more to dig into what you can do with his style. So like going back to what I was saying about the patterns of sixes and sevens, like Troy Grady shows you how to do that, but it's mostly just in one box kind of area, like your main pentatonic box that everybody knows, because that is the easiest place to do it. But I started experimenting with like a mixed Lydian pentatonic box, a root, major third, 4, 5, the root, and like suddenly it's sounding, but the same sorts of patterns give you that cascading effect with your lines. And then moving around, it's how to like shift between different areas of the fretboard with slides. You watch Eric does it incredibly well, but also and changing direction. So then it's like you're kind of you're playing these lines and you're trying to control the direction of the lines.
Yeah,
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, I think it's a lot of it is like no choice, but at the same time, a lot of it is fretboard mechanics. Like how he sets up the sequencing, like he can shift into like a pentatonic 3-note per string idea within the middle of that run, and like you said, you know, like put things into like a 7 form or something like that make it flow better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great, great player.
Yeah, and I do want one other thing that he does with the spread, are the root 3-10, putting the third on top. He's really often he'll take a chord progression and he'll play those arpeggios and resolve the chord just at the right moment. It's really, really tasteful when he does it. I just think he's got a lot going for him, and he has an entire album where he plays straight jazz that's like really well done. He uses a hollow body guitar, and I really enjoyed that album.
Yeah, he moved over to the 335 right at some point. I can't remember where that was, but I want to say like early 2000s. He moved over there for some.
He played that at the House of Blues show that you were talking about for a couple songs in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Switched from a Strat.
He's such a tasty player.
Yeah, so that's my one of my most influential albums in terms of affecting my playing style.
Does he have any recent stuff out? What's his most recent?
I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't followed him in a couple of years, so I'm not sure what he's doing now.
He does have a couple good albums out. There's one, it has the track Columbia, which I really like, but he's not as fast as he used to be, but he still sounds like Eric.
I did see a show recently. It's funny you said I did see a show recently where he was playing some kind of festival and he was trying to burn it, and he didn't have the same control. It was like a few years ago. Yeah. And I mean, it was an off night or something, but you know, at the same time, it's got to be tough, right? To, you know, have that level of technical mastery and maintenance it. I mean, when he's in his 20s, he was probably playing like, we used to talk about like 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
Keep those things up. And I mean, now how old is he now? His 50s?
Gray hair. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like anything else, you lose it after a while, but
yeah, absolutely.
It's okay.
I don't play like I used to.
That's why we record it.
Right.
I could do it. Yeah. All right, Aaron, what do you got on the list? We're trying to.
Mine's a completely different direction.
That's fine. Lay it on us.
So, from what we had said originally was okay, most influential albums, and that to me was just overall musically, not guitar. And that one would be my very first Jesus Christ Superstar. This is my most probably influential album ever. Mainly, and the main reason is because it was my first introduction to concept album. It was amazing that I could go from beginning to end and have a complete story. That for me was like, this is amazing. It changed music for me forever. And especially this album because it has, for me, for such an early age, it had time signature changes. It was just put together so well. And at a young age, I had no idea what was going on, but because I listened to it over and over and over, it was just ingrained in me in terms of all these things musically that were happening. And it wasn't until later on in life where I started figuring out, whoa, this part's in, 5/8, or there's certain things that are going on. It was just, for me, something that was like, wow, I didn't realize that you could do so much within an album. And that whole concept album really played into my life later on, where it was, okay, so you have the musicals. For me, something like Les Miserables or Cats or Phantom of the Opera, or I got into that whole Broadway thing because of this whole concept thing. That really fascinated me in terms of the idea of a story, be it even going into something like Tommy's The Who, or, Pink Floyd. Those types of things really appealed to me as an artist at a young age. It really said to me, okay, this is what you can do musically on a much grander scale. And this actually leads into my next album, which we can talk about later, but the Beatles, and how Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band started off as a concept album, but didn't end up that way. But then that got me into the whole Beatles thing, and that's that's huge.
Who was the composer on that first bit?
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
All right, you guys can literally throw stuff at me now. Never heard it.
Jesus Christ Superstar?
Never heard it.
I listened to most of it. I didn't watch the movie or the live action play. Nope. That
I've never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I realized the cultural impact of that record, having heard about it. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't it based on the last hours of before the crucifixion? Is that kind of like is that the story it's telling?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not too religious, I'll say it that way. I'm more spiritual. But that it was just more along the lines of, it's a concept. It's this story that can take you from point A to point B. It wasn't just, here's a song and then on to the next song and on to the next song. It was an actual, like, this is a concept.
Right. You got to pull the camera back to see the entire picture, basically. Right. Yeah.
And I have to listen to the whole album to understand exactly what's going on. It's not like, okay, here's a single. It was, here's the next hour. And we're going to sit down and listen to this masterpiece. And that was just like,
My students are always like flabbergasted when I say this, that I have a hard time with musicals. They're like, but how? You're a musician. How do you have a hard time? Because for me, it's like I'm a purist in both fields. I love literary ideas and I love music, but putting them together, I just can't get it. I can I'll never go see a Broadway musical ever. I have no desire. And it's a shame for me to say this, because I shouldn't be. I'm not devaluing the art form, but like just teaching a story and it's break to a choreographed song, like they all get it. Like I can't suspend belief long enough to kind of to get into it that way. But that being said, when I think of people like Rodgers and Hammerstein and Weber and these composers, right. I have a lot of respect for how they write, because that takes a lot of imagination and a lot of knowledge of just how music needs to operate in terms of storytelling, which I think is quite fascinating to be able to do.
I really enjoyed musicals as a kid. I haven't seen one for a long time. But yeah, I've seen Phantom on Broadway, and I've seen just tons of, I enjoy most of the time I'm looking at the pit. I'm watching the musicians, just how it all comes together. That's just really, really cool.
I had to play a gig 2 years ago. I was called by my school to play a gig for High School Musical because their guitar player dropped out the last minute. And they said, Mr. Skaltz, I know you teach literature there, but are you willing? I heard your guitar player can do the show. They said, we'll pay you. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and play it. It was the most excruciating 2 hours of my life. I mean, and learning the charts. I'm like, even my wife's coming down saying, are you really playing that? I'm like, yeah, I'm really playing this. It was like, not to knock the musical. It's not me. Can't do it. And I was even trying to get into it. I was like, okay, I'm going to salvage this experience. So like, there's certain tracks in High School Musical. I was going to put like delay effects and phasers and different things on there. And I was just trying, to kind of make it my own. I get into the pit. They're like, no, we don't want any of that stuff. Play the chart as is. I'm like, bitches.
Well, I really enjoyed what I heard of Jesus Christ Superstar. It had a very 70s sound. Like it was like early rock kind of sound, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young kind of rock, like the tones, the production value.
Right.
And, it would go from like a big upbeat kind of rock song to almost like an aria that must have had some plot. They were talking about something in the plot, but I really found myself constantly listening to the bass. I really, really enjoyed the bass playing on the songs that I listened to.
Is it electric bass or is it like upright?
It's an electric bass. It's really, there's a lot of movement in the bass. He doesn't sit on the root note. He's really moving around a lot. And I'm working on expanding my bass playing abilities, but I'm not the greatest bass player, but I really appreciated what he was doing. And it's actually made me want to like sit down and try to learn what he's doing on the bass.
Interesting you said that. Not to move the conversation there, but I found that if you really want to get, I was just having this lesson with a student a few days ago, that if you really want to get a sense of how to compose and feel progression, start writing on bass guitar. There's something about just having a bass in your hands that lends you more to hearing harmonies that are not really there, in sort of in the ether, but you kind of have to audiate things a lot more. And plus, it's a really neat instrument to learn to play.
Oh my gosh,
I love bass. I would love to actually. I should get one. I used to teach bass in the studio a lot, but I would love. Yeah, see, yeah, very, very, very cool.
Yeah, anytime there's a band that's missing the bassist where I work, I'm like, oh yeah, I get to play bass today.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because even tonally speaking, there's a lot of power in the bass.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think it's overlooked a lot in bands. And then when you get guys like Geddy and Claypool and all these and Flea and these guys that kind of dominate that sonic region. I love those bands because it is a very powerful instrument.
Oh my gosh,
love it.
Yeah, I mean the Chili Peppers are great because of Flea. Like he's what I listen to. Like
well for sure.
80% of my brainwaves go to Flea probably. I like Fruit Money, but
no, I get that.
Certain bands are strong bass, and it makes it for me.
Yeah, no, I hear it because I think it's many people. But he's got more of a larger than life attitude anyway, even the presence on stage. But even on the records, like you can hear, it just cuts through everything. Plus, it's the one frequency that dominates regions of the spectrum. It cuts through things. It's got a lot of physical power behind it.
Yeah, when it's not there, you certainly know it. That's for sure.
That's right.
Even when you're playing bass, and there are times when I'll be experimenting with a band. When you go for like a fill and you go up into the neck and you're like, oh, that,
bottom end falls out.
The bottom end falls out and you're like, okay, I can. It's a weird animal to kind of play with where you have to know when and where to kind of place that tasty stuff because you have to keep that low end. You have to keep it locked in with the kick drum and the drummer, that foundation. You have to keep that solid. Whereas if you stray away from that, it's kind of like, ooh, that felt weird. That's not right.
When I was growing up, my teachers would always tell me like the bass should always match the kick. Right. Yeah. That was the one thing. But this is like in the 80s when it was like literally it had to be a tone for every kick drum hit that you had. And it wasn't until later when I started listening to like other bassists, I'm like, wow, this really is a very expressive instrument. It's never pitched that way. At least it wasn't in the 80s. It wasn't pitched that way in modern or 80s rock, I should say. But, if you look at other players, especially Jeff Berlin, Jeff kind of approaches the bass like a melodic instrument. If you ever listen to him play stuff. There's a lot of neat lines.
So I've been reading Victor Wooten's The Music Lesson. I brought it up another time. I've been slowly making my way through because I'm reading multiple things. But there's a great passage in there where Victor's actually out on a gig and his mentor in the book is on the gig with him, filling in on guitar. And at break, he tells him, like, if you want to make if you want to get hired for gigs and you want to make the whole band sound better, but nobody's going to realize it was you that did it. He was talking about like when the saxophone player goes to take a solo and you feel like he's getting towards the peak of his solo. You work your way up the essentially the scale or whatever. You work your way up an octave or 2 octaves over the course of a few bars and get up to a pedal tone, like the root note, and pedal on it for like 8 bars the whole time that he's climaxing in his solo, the saxophone player. And like the drummer picked up on it. He did it in the gig. And so like that creating the energy flow, it like created that sense of like this is the climax. And then at the right moment he walked his way back down the scale and back to the root, and that low end came back in.
You know what I always wish would happen? I mean, I think music students, I wish they'd get this idea. You know, I've like stuff you're just talking about. Isn't it really true that what makes musicians really great musicians are the non-musical things? You know, like being able, it has little to do with material, like what you're playing. It has everything to do with how you think about your instrument. You know, how you think about entrances and exits and accents and placement and timing. And it's like all the stuff that you really can't teach, because how do you teach that stuff, you know, other than just like experience, right. You know, like learning how to do it by playing live. But I think students come to us and they're looking for like, well, how do we make this work? Well, I don't know. I mean, 10% of what we teach them, or 90% of what we teach them is really 10% of the good stuff.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's, I think there's a lot to be said for just, you know, you want to learn how to play? All right, just get out on a stage and play. Right. Get in with a band and get knocked around a little bit, and then you start really learning your stuff.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. You kind of have to go through the trenches in order to kind of figure out on the other side of it what it all means and how to actually phrase and the whole thing. It's just,
I mean, you ever try to teach somebody how to play in pocket? Holy shit, I don't think you can even do that. We've tried, right? How do you teach that? How do you teach feel? You know, you really can't. You know, it's more of a matter of setting up, you know, a space for students to play, and hopefully they feel it. You know,
it helps to have musical examples of someone playing on top of the beat or playing a little behind the beat, so they can at least hear it and try to imitate it.
Yeah.
Even then, though, the student has to be ready for that. You have to go through a good period of playing and understanding of what that actually means. Like even just to hear it, you're kind of like, yeah, I kind of hear it. But once you actually are put in that position and you can kind of, again, feel the push or the pull of the beat and that pocket, then all of a sudden, then that light bulb starts to kind of flicker in. You're kind of going, wait, oh, okay. I'm starting to feel that. Now I'm starting to get what you're talking about. Like, yeah, I think it's important that you start off with that idea of here's what behind the beat and ahead of the beat and in the pocket means. But until it's actually under your fingers, and like I said, the student has to be ready for that. That's not something that you can teach them in the first year or two. I know for me, it was like, I struggled with that for a good bit of time. And it was, you know, you do have that moment where you're like, okay, I think I'm starting to understand what this pocket is and having some command over it.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but I mean, I think maybe, you know, one of the things that we should go toward, and this would be just killer for any kind of systematized instruction, but like have a student with you for about a year and then send them off and let them figure it out. Because I think self-teaching this kind of stuff is the way to go. Like really understanding, just playing, you know, with bands and playing with people and just getting involved in musicianship, I think is something that you really can't do sitting one-on-one in a studio. I've tried it. I mean, how many years have we been trying to teach this stuff? Here's a great example of what, you know, playing in this particular zone of feel is like. And it's hard to transmit.
But why can't they do that at the same time?
That's what I was just going to say. I think at the same time, where being able to do that stuff within a band and be able to explore within a band yourself, extremely important. But at the same time, private lessons, being able to take certain concepts that don't apply to the band, whether it's technique or rhythm or whatever it is. That's extremely important. I mean, I've got a handful, if not more, of students in my head where I'm like, yeah, even the ones that are just in band, I'm like, yeah, I wish they would be taking private lessons, because there's stuff that they need to be working on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I for me, it's like, let's lead into like my pick, all right, for where this is going. When I was a composition student, I had Paul Barsom was my teacher, just incredible composer, an incredible teacher, taught me a lot about how to live a creative lifestyle. I learned a lot from this guy. And I was such a shitty student because like he was trying to show me really revelatory things, but I wasn't ready. And it wasn't until I kind of went on my own and started like doing some self-teaching work and studying, there's like, oh, that's what he was talking about. Oh, that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I think maybe a large part of it is readiness, like for instance, so my pick, and it's really hard for me to think about, like one particular album, but if I had to look at my lists and all this stuff, I would have to say the most influential record for me is Frank Zappa's Apostrophe.
Oh, okay.
Without a doubt. That album, just listening the whole way through and going like, wow, okay. Not only can you do that kind of stuff, but you can literally be a human being that thinks of that kind of stuff.
Don't you eat that yellow snow?
Yeah. I mean, that just changed the rules.
Yeah, that was
across the board for me.
Amazing album, really good. Yeah.
And he's not even singing. He's like, it's not even normal music in the normal sense. He's like speaking, telling a story in a lot of these songs.
Well, that's just it. I think it's more of like it sort of broke down the rules of what music is defined as, right? I mean, it's literally for me. I think I look at it now as like we have music, particularly, and we have composing, and they're not always mutually exclusive. But I think that record was a really good way of kind of bringing them together and saying like, because we can compose by mixing sounds. So like Zappa was into this guy called Varese. If you guys ever want to like listen to albums like from Zappa when he was with Mothers of Invention, like Weasels Rip My Flesh, that's a really good record. But if you listen to Weasels Rip My Flesh, that is Edgar Varese. And if you're interested, Varese was this composer. I think he was, I want to say Danish. Maybe I have that wrong. But he did pieces like Ionization. Listen to that one, right? Or Deserts even. And these pieces were literally, he was mixing sounds together. So he would like take like what do they call it? Like not an air horn, but those things that kind of, you turn the crank and it makes that thing. Yeah, he would take that as the primary instrument and he'd put it in. He'd mix it in with other musical chemistry. He'd put things, mixing sounds. And that was highly influential on Zappa's early work. So when you get to Apostrophe, he has all that stuff mixed in with all the pop stuff of the day, and lyrically speaking, I mean, the guy was like, oh yeah, come on. He's doing certain moves lyrically in that album that are just like genius. Like Cosmic Debris.
Oh my gosh.
Like poking fun at spiritual gurus and the bullshit they throw out, and so a lot of it's very satirical. I mean, Zappa was able to satirize American culture and how stupid we can be in some cases and how we're not thinking about certain things and we're driven materialistically or whatnot and his political views and stuff. But as all satirists do, he has a medium to talk about that stuff and then have this really cool, music that even sounds humorous, like with the vibes and, you know what I mean? And even like in Cosmic Debris, I'll never forget it. There's one, there's one lyric in Cosmic Debris. It's like a can of whipped cream, the pop topped off, right? The cap popped off, and you hear the vibes go, boop, boop.
Yep.
It's like the cap like hits the floor. Like, holy shit, that's brilliant, And guys like who was doing that? I can't think. Symphony Fantastique. Who wrote that? It was an old symphony. I know
what you're talking about.
Romantic period. Yeah, romantic period where like the head was cut off by the guillotine and the head was rolling on the ground. Yeah. And it was so he was borrowing those classical elements in writing on that pop record. And I remember the history of that album where he said, I think it was Dweezil was born in the hospital when he was mixing the record. So he was like going back and forth to the hospital to see his son and coming home and mixing the album. I love everything about that record. I think from front to back, I listened to the whole thing. And Aaron mentioned like concept record. If you kind of listen to the whole thing, the first 5 tracks are one song. I know it's like 8 songs on the record.
Yeah, they're like 2 minute and a half, 2 minutes each.
Yeah, right. And he never has endings. Zappa never had an ending. He never did that. He just rolled one track into the next.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done with this now. I'm going to this thing. He just moves right in. It's like, so everything he was doing was breaking down boundaries, and that was my first way in. And then, of course, I became a big fan. So you get to like Joe's Garage, which is a different thing. Chic Your Booty, which is very, very vulgar and a lot, lyrically speaking, And then it got me into the Mothers, which was like his earlier stuff. But I'd have to say, give Apostrophe a listen.
Yeah, an amazing album. I remember listening to that nonstop when you and I were together, and man, it's just, he does it very, very, very well. Like you said, there's all these little hints and little things and Easter eggs all throughout. You're just like, you can listen to it again to this day and be like, wow, okay, I never realized that was happening. That's awesome. He's just the way that he went about composing everything. And for me, it was all to tape, and all those musicians were like spot on. And all these stories about how Steve Vai would just like transcribe like note for note by ear and try to figure out all this stuff. And all these guys were doing this, like the demands that he had was just like, wow, Frank's on it, man.
Steve Vai had to transcribe when he was fresh out of Berkeley. He went with Zappa's band, and Frank commissioned him to transcribe something called The Black Napkins, which was a Zappa composition. It was one of the hardest things Vai ever had to do. It literally drove him nuts. And I think the story goes where he actually went to Frank almost in a breakdown and said, I don't know if I can do this. This is Steve Vai we're talking about. And Frank was patient and said, just get through it. You'll be fine. Take your time with it. And I always love that, because people look at Frank Zappa like he's just this kind of quirky, goofy guy, but you dig deep, it's like there's a lot of complex stuff going on.
If you get the chance, I would definitely recommend, there's an interview with Rick Beato and Steve Vai, and they actually get into the whole Frank and all of what you're just kind of talking about, and how they used to get into polyrhythms and how he had to just transcribe for him. And it was not the normal interview that you have with Steve Vai. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. So if you get the chance, by all means, check that interview out. And then another one that I would say to check out, since we are kind of talking about Frank and how he took those old school sounds and incorporated them into his music. There is a podcast called 20,000 Hertz. I highly recommend this podcast to anybody who is into sound. They did an episode about a month or so ago on like ASMR, and they just do a bunch of stuff. And the reason why I say this is because last week they did a podcast on just this idea of like sounds of, like you were talking about, the xylophone and the whistle of going down, and Wile E. Coyote plummeting to his death and whatnot like that, and where all that comes from. So you talking about Frank and all his sounds, that was an excellent podcast. They do a lot of stuff incorporating sound. It's really, really, really good episode.
Okay.
Yeah. Apostrophe. Awesome. And then there's the one, it's just an all instrumental where I believe
the title track.
Yeah. Apostrophe.
We played that in a band with Chip. Remember that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Remember we were trying to learn that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't that one receive some commercial success, like mainstream
Apostrophe?
Success? That track specifically.
That track, the instrumental track, I don't know. It's very, very possible. It was a very popular record. It's one of his more widely sort of acknowledged albums. I think most people kind of know. But his later stuff, like he had, what was that one track, Valley Girls or Valley Girl? It was on the Ship Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch record. It was like kind of a few years before he died. That one got a lot of radio airplay, and stuff from Joe's Garage did too, which is another. I mean, if I had to pick another Zappa record, it's my influential favorite. It's that double album, Joe's Garage. That one is just really fantastic too. But Apostrophe, just, I don't know. For me, it was more of a. It was just mind blowing, right? Like Aaron said, you can listen to it today, and it's interesting. There's stuff behind the scenes. You're like wow,
Yeah.
he really did that. Yeah, okay. It was.
Did Satriani also study with Frank Zappa?
No.
Or was it only Vai? I'm
Vai.
getting them confused then.
Yeah, so Satch. Oh, well, speaking of Satriani, I know you this week you kind of had a lot of listening for Satriani. This guy was my wheelhouse. Aaron knows this. I mean, I spent a lot of years on Satch's material. I've been listening to Satch since probably I was like 14 or 15 years old. Much of my legato styles come from him. Well, a lot of things come from him. Honestly, but there's so much going on in his music. I mean, one thing I love about Satriani, if you guys get a chance, is to watch on YouTube. There is a lesson that Satriani did with Guitar Center with this contest winner. I love it.
Oh,
You've seen that? Isn't that great? I mean,
Yeah, he kind of like critiques the player's really good. Like he can play the Satriani song.
Yeah, and like what I love about it, I was just actually teaching this lesson a few days ago. I said to my student, watch that lesson that Satriani did, because the one thing, this kid who won the contest, like played Satch Boogie for him, right? It was pretty good. It was actually like pretty nailed in. Even Joe's like, this is really good, until the very end of the lesson where the guy said, what do you think I should work on? He's like, all right, I'll play a G, right? And they just kind of did the chug, and he said, all right, I'm gonna take a solo. And after all that shredding, the only thing this kid knew how to do was play in the G minor pentatonic box in the third fret position. And Joe's like, well, do something else. He's like, he moved it up to the 15th fret. So his knowledge of scales was limited in this improvisational thing. And Joe's like, no. You know, you want to start thinking like in different scalar systems. And then Joe took a solo, and he did something on like one single string when he's like incorporating Lydian forms and stuff. So it was really a fascinating expose. If any people out there want to get a sense of who Satch was beyond the curtain, because, you know, Satriani, for those that don't know, was pretty much like us. He was a guitar instructor, you know, in the Bay Area of San Francisco for many years before he was playing with Greg Kinn Band. He had this band called Squares in the Bay Area, but then his instrumental stuff really took off, starting with Not of This Earth, which I think is a fantastic entry-level Satch record. One of my favorites, actually. I think it was his very first album, Not of This Earth. Then you get to Surfing with the Alien, and just like, okay, he just blew the doors wide open on people.
Yeah.
But when you get to Flying in a Blue Dream, that's my favorite. I think by that point, his writing skill had honed into a nice mix of technique and taste, you know. And I just love that album. For me was the best one across the board. Yeah. But I don't think he ever stayed with Zappa. No, that was Vai. Vai got into Zappa through Berkeley, you know.
And then after that, Vai went to Satriani.
No, Satriani was his first teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Satch taught him how to play from scratch, basically.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
like the story goes that he showed up at Satriani's door one day. He had his guitar in one hand and a pack of strings in the other. He said, what do I do with these things? Literally. Yeah. And Satch sat him down, and they started, and he was his teacher for many years until he went to Berkeley School. Yeah.
What I really enjoy about Satriani is like, yes, he can shred on the guitar technically, but his compositions are really interesting to me. And like, he's got such a wide variety of sounds that he pulls out. Like, even on one record, like on Flying in a Blue Dream, he goes from, I mean, Flying in a Blue Dream is one, like, I feel like I'm like floating in the clouds whenever I listen to that.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Phenomenal.
That album, literally, when I listen to that record now, I'm transported back to when I'm 14 years old, sitting on the beach in New Jersey, where my family used to live, on the shoreline, and like looking in the clouds and like listening to that record. And it's like everything was like light and free and fun and awesome, and you know, right? But there's a lot of good stuff in between the lines there. Like his writing is so good on that record, you know. But you're right, across the entire spectrum of that album, it feels like you're floating.
Oh yeah, especially that track. But he really goes from that. He's got like, I don't remember the names of all the tracks, but he's got one where he's got like really overdriven harmonica ripping on it. He's got that's really, is that Big Bad Moon? Or
Big Bad Moon was the blues track off there. He's
got some with acoustic sounds, and
I Believe was the ballad, which was really great on that record. Ride,
really catchy.
It was kind of nice. Yeah, catchy hook drive was that one. And then he gets into like the Bells of something, Lalal or something like that, where he's pulling from. He actually has an affinity for comics. I don't know if you knew this. Like Surf with the Alien is a Silver Surfer.
Right.
It's the comic book hero. Yeah. And the Bells of Lalal, I think is the name of it, was one of the love interests of the Silver Surfer, was in his human form, and was But anyway, so like in those tracks, he's doing all the polyphonic stuff. Day at the Beach, right? That I mean, it's like, oh man, it's like there was on that Vanilla track I recorded a few years ago. I largely borrowed that. That was like that middle section I did came from that album. You know, I credit him for all those ideas about, you know, how to move tones in both right and left hand, because the overall effect is like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And it's funny, when I remember I was in Florida when I was pushing that record, and I was at a party once. We're sitting outside, and there's like a little campfire there, and there was an acoustic guitar, and I picked it up, and I started playing Day at the Beach, and everybody's like, what are you doing? Like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. That is Joe. For me, Joe was like pushing those boundaries of what the guitar can do, you know, or at least I should say, introducing players to new ideas on the fretboard that we didn't even think about. You can play chords with two hands. Well, Stanley Jordan was doing that before Joe came around, but the fact that, like you said, he was so tasty about it, you know, he listens to harmonies so well, and just the fact that here's a guitar player in the rock genre that knows theory really intensely. Wow. Like, what's a Lydian mode? I was 14 years old going, what's the Lydian thing? Oh, I'm going to start reading. Oh, there are modes of the scale?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And each mode is like, gives you different tonal characteristics. I can write in something called Locrian. Holy shit.
Yeah.
You know, it was just for me, that was it. I think that record, once I heard those albums, I was like, that's it. I knew my playing would never be like it was. And there's not to knock how I grew up, because as Aaron and I even talked about on previous episodes, you know, I remember some of my most fun experiences on guitar was putting in Master of Puppets in my little boombox player. And back then, cassette tapes used to run a half step fast. Remember that? A half step higher. So you had to like retune your guitar, even close. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, because the tape would run faster. So you had to retune your guitar to work for the tone variance, right? But I mean, that was the fun of it, was like figuring things out by ear and learning stuff. But when I get to Satriani, I was like, okay, here's a player. This for me is a guitar player.
Yeah. Yeah. He's for me, Satch was coming out of something like Metallica. And that's the whole reason I kind of figured out Satch, is because Metallica's guitarist, Kirk Hammett, that's the same thing. Joe Satriani was his teacher.
Right.
So Joe's actually taught many people. But for me, coming out of Metallica, I was like, all right, well, okay, Satch was his teacher. Let's listen to Satch. And then kind of listening to Satch, and his legato runs and his technique are like just out of this world. But for me, the way that Satch phrases and knows when to let things just open and let those notes sing, and it doesn't have to be crazy technical, and he knows that fine balance between the two. He can really, like, always with you, always with me, or always with me, always with you, always with me. Yeah,
always with me, always with you,
always with me, always with you. Just the way that he kind of, it's not crazy technical, but
it's tasty technical.
It's tasty technical. Yeah. And the way that he kind of does that, for me, that's why I was like, wow, Satch is like, his ear knows when to put certain things in and when to really get like just a sweet, sick run. For me, that's why I chose Satch over Vi.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I enjoyed Vi a lot, but there was something about how Satch phrased things. It was just, it really spoke to me.
When Aaron and I saw the G3 tour with Yngwie, I'll never forget, we were in Pittsburgh. We watched this show, and we had this very same conversation, Joe. We had said Yngwie was on first. Okay? And Yngwie, like even Satriani said, Yngwie is like a force of nature. Like, but everything about Yngwie, and it was funny because even Yngwie, when he was done, threw his guitar to his tech, take his guitar off and threw it to his tech.
I'll never forget that.
Right, and the tech dropped the guitar
because the tech wasn't ready for him to throw it.
And Yngwie's sitting there, he's like, you sit there like, what the hell just happened? Right. Anyway, so Yngwie was his thing, and Yngwie's Yngwie, right? And then Vi gets up there next, and Vi's all about this larger than life lushness, but there's a bit of ego in there too. And I love Vice work. And then Joe gets up there last, and he's just everything about Joe was like cool, professional, down to earth kind of guy. Here I am. But when he played, it's like people were into it. I would say the crowd went berserk when Satriani took the stage, more than the other two guys.
And he makes it look effortless. Like he's he's like not even like actually holding the guitar. It's just kind of like air. Kind of playing air. Where the other guys, they just like, and it's not, I'm not knocking any of the other.
No, but they're exerting force.
Yeah, they're exerting force. And Joe's just kind of just like
very relaxed and laid back. And
wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, probably my favorite guitarist of all time would be Satriani.
Yeah,
very neat.
Yeah,
and I even respect the guy now. I mean, I'm not big for sellouts. I'm not saying he did, but Satch is in a phase now where he's up there on stage with the glasses, and he's very, very, I'm saying very more commercial. I still like his stuff.
See, I don't like Joe's stuff now.
Well, it's more, it's becoming formulaic. Oh, I shouldn't say it's been. I think Engines of Creation, those later records, even Time Machine to some degree, was beginning a bit formula. But his later releases have been kind of going back to roots a little bit, But for me, nothing beats the early albums.
Yeah, see,
Not This Earth, Dreamin' 11,
his more mod, the stuff that he's putting out now. I can tell that he's not, and it goes for any artist. It's like the third album thing, It's usually the third album for most artists that are like, wow, that's the album. This album, the third album, is great. This is like, a good mix of like technical, and they're starting to really get their, storytelling down. And the third album, that's it. And you can tell that they've actually spent time composing and really thinking about their parts, and they've spent time. Whereas the newer ones, for me, they just don't feel like that. They almost feel like they're just put together, and I don't get the whole, Satch Boogie, or, Flying in a Blue Dream, or Day at the Beach, where it's like, that was different.
The magic is not, I said this from day one with any creator. I think most creators in their life go through a magical period. It's their magical years, and after that, on the fringe of those magical years, I think they're just turning wheels. I hate to say it, but I even in literature, you kind of see that too.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure what that is. That brings up a really good question. Like, to be a creative person doesn't mean you only get a bit of time to do your great work, and after that, it's just kind of fruitless, or is that completely wrong? And maybe it's just the way things kind of come together. I don't know, but it's a really good conversation. Gotta have. Hey. Oh yeah. Speaking of, that's awesome.
Hi.
All right, guys. What do we think?
Can you say hi?
Hi.
Right there. Say hi.
Hi.
Closing comments.
I want to say that I love Satriani. I find his style it's harder to get away using that in a lot of musical situations. And I feel like he's like technically just phenomenal, but I feel like if I was to go and try to play some Satriani at a gig, it would be too much for normal people, and so I don't find it as useful in what I'm doing. Not to say it's not incredible in any way. I do find I'm drawn more towards Eric Johnson's playing, because I feel like it is like, if you put a cascading Eric run in a Jimmy Buffett song, it's just like it's okay. It sounds it can work. If you start tapping and getting into playing crazy exotic scales and something, it's not necessarily as friendly sounding to normal ears.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about usage too, and how the audiences are ready for certain things you throw in there in the mix. But yeah, great stuff. Well, guys, what do we think? This require. I think this requires another 2 episodes, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that we're gonna have to go into this a little bit more.
Boy, went to like 1 album a piece.
Yeah,
a few.
Yeah, plus Joe. Yeah, Satriani.
All right, guys. Good luck. Have a great week.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in, everybody. And we've got, I believe, another guest host next week. Should be good.
Yeah.
All right, fret
And
buzzers.
see you guys from Wyoming.
Yeah, have fun. Enjoy the view.
Yeah,
See you
enjoy.
guys in Wyoming.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good week. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Why are people talking to the camera?
I got stuck with the pillow. Let's get some slurping sounds from you. Let's keep that in the. Put that at the end of the episode today.